Hello, nerds. Nerds for Humanity. Phil is becoming a recurring guest on the pod. Welcome back, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Feeling pretty good actually. I just hit some doors in Philly for Kamala Harris, and I know you've been doing the same thing. So it's put in the work, but I feel like we're gonna get a good result.
Yeah, so I'm in Nevada now, which was an adventure getting here because driving from the Bay Area to Nevada, you go through like the Sierra Mountains, and last night there was like a snowstorm
Really?
and
Dang.
they shut down the highway like 80 East. And I literally was like, oh my God, like I just drove 3 hours to get to the mountains and I was like 1 hour away from Reno. And they're like, no cars are going through because some truck, uh, crashed or whatever.
Wow.
So then I was like, oh, what do I do? Do I pull over and sleep in the car and go in the morning? So I ended up like pulling over and waiting, listening to podcasts for an hour. And then all of a sudden, like they started reopening it and it was great. They gave me a little grief for not having chains, but then
Hmm.
it was kind of like a commercial. He's like, oh, I guess it's a Subaru, so you should be okay.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
That's
So
great. I mean, braving a snowstorm for democracy. I mean, what greater accomplishment can you have?
through rain, sleet, or snow, man. So tell me a little bit about like obviously both of us are doing everything we can, like putting our time where our mouth is and talking to voters in key battleground states. Let's zoom out for a second. Like, how
Yeah.
do you feel about Tuesday?
Nervous because geez, this is a high stakes. I mean, it feels like it's a lot higher stakes for us than it is for, I feel like, Republicans in a lot of ways. I feel like
Mm,
end of the day, if Kamala Harris wins, Republicans will have a shot in 4 years. They'll have probably decent midterms. They'll have the Senate. They'll still have most likely the Supreme Court. They'll have a lot of checks to they'll be compromised, all that stuff. If Trump wins, he probably goes in with a Republican Senate, Republican House, Republican Supreme Court, and no guardrails for criminal because he has criminal immunity. Like that's just like I think it's a lot higher stakes for us. So I'm nervous for that reason. But I think I feel good overall. Like I think we're gonna win in the end. I think this is an election that is breaking our way at the exact right moment. There's a few things that kind of in particular give me that feeling.
mhm,
One is David Plouffe, one of the kind of campaign advisors for Kamala Harris, talked about how undecided voters who kind of made up their minds the last 2 weeks, breaking
mhm.
heavily for Harris. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then also we got the Seltzer poll out, I think today, in the last hour or so or two. That's one of the most accurate polls of Iowa. And
Mm.
it showed Kamala up 3, which is
Oh,
shocking. And I don't think she's going to win Iowa, but I think that is like a signal of Kamala Harris doing exceptionally well with independents, particularly independent women. And so that's another signal of people breaking our way at the last second. I think Trump's Madison Square Garden stuff was insane. I think it's just reminding people of who he surrounds himself with, and
mm.
it's not a campaign or president we want. I just feel like everything you kind of imagine that would point to it breaking towards Kamala feels like it is. And I just think that at the end of the day, we're going to see that continue, and it'll be scary because it's going to take some time to count the votes. Like that's how it works. All these mail-in ballots, it's going to take some time, but I expect that when Wednesday comes around, she'll win it, and I think it won't be like a one state difference. I think she'll sweep it. I think she'll get a good number of swing states.
You said something that I hadn't thought about, which was you suggested that if Trump wins, you think it's also likely that he'll win the House. I hadn't anticipated that. I thought if he won, it would be a split control, that they would have the White House and the Senate, but we would have the Congress.
So I think it was, I forget if it was split ticket or which model put it out, but I think where they're putting it is about 214 between the Democrats and Republicans in the House.
Oh God.
Insanely close, right? And So it's true that it's possible that Trump could win, and then because we get like a few seats in California and New York, then we're able to like keep the House narrowly. But I mean, I would be surprised at that just because there are a lot of kind of swing districts we'd have to be defending too. Like I think there's a swing district in North Carolina, one I think Pennsylvania as well. And so it just feels like it would be very surprising to me if we were able to hold all those while Trump won in those swing states. And then we also able to make inroads in New York when it seems like New York is one of those places that is likely sliding a bit towards Trump. Not enough for him to win New York, of course, but like there's some movement to him. So I would be surprised if we ended up with a Trump Senate, a Trump White House, who are saying affirmatively, we are going to vote for Trump to be our president. And that didn't transfer into getting those like 50-50 House seats, you know? I think it seems unlikely to me that would happen, but not impossible.
Yeah, you know, one interesting thing is I kind of agree with the undecideds breaking for Harris, because my sense would be like if you were going to vote for Trump, you already would have decided you were going to do that. And there were a lot of these double haters and Nikki Haley voters who really have been torn. Yeah. And I think on the whole, the latest economic news, like inflation's still around 2%, GDP keeps growing. You know, I think there were generally decent numbers coming out.
Yeah.
And the stock market's looking amazing. Anybody who has a 401k is feeling pretty good.
Shocking. So, we were supposed to have a Great Depression if Biden won, but
yeah, I remember him.
I don't know how, you know.
He said, "Oh, the day after Biden wins, you kiss your 401k goodbye." And it was like, I'm actually more concerned if he gets elected, what happens to my 401k?
Yeah, same here.
So I think because of that, like if we had big inflation numbers of stock market, then negative reaction to that, bad unemployment like zooming up, then I think a lot of those undecideds would have probably said, okay, I'll hold my nose and vote for Trump because I like the Obama continuation economy. But since I think the news was generally good, I mean, the only thing was like the new jobs were a little bit less than you would expect. We don't know if it's because of the 2 hurricanes and the strike, but you know, that could have been better. I mean, if that were better, it would have been we would have run the table on the economic news. Yeah. So I could see the late breaker saying, you know, I held out, but you know, maybe things are getting a little more under control, and I don't want the chaos of Trump. So yeah, I could see us capturing a lot of those. You know, here's an interesting thing that happened today.
Yeah.
So I knock on this door and I'm asking for a registered Democrat voter, and it was a female name, and the what I imagine is the husband answers, and I was like, oh, I'm looking for, let's say, Jane. Is Jane there? And he's like, oh, she's here. I was like, oh, well, I'm a volunteer for, you know, Vice President Harris. I'm encouraging people to come out and vote. And he's like, well, she's not voting for Harris. And then the Jane appears. And I was like, oh, are you Jane? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, will you be voting this Tuesday? She's like, yeah. I was like, oh, it sounds like you've made up your mind. And he was like, yeah, she's made up her mind. And I was like, I don't know if she's made up, but I didn't want to get in.
Yeah.
But reading the body language, I think because I was about to hand her the flyer, and she reached out, but then he kind of literally stepped in front, and I was like, who knows what she's gonna do on Tuesday?
Yeah, I mean, I've been like knocking doors in Pennsylvania for the past couple weekends, and I went this last weekend with today actually with my friend Liam, and we had that experience like several times where we were looking for the wife, they were a Democrat and the husband answered the door and would say either, we're not political here, we don't do politics, or we're all voting for Trump, or we've already decided. Like, there's some variation of that, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't have like the explicit, like the wife comes over and like, like you had, but
Yeah.
I do think there is like this like phenomenon of like, is a huge gender gap, and that's going to show up including in like the same household. And I think that is like, I agree with you. It's very awkward when you have that moment when you're like at the door, you're like, I'm looking for your wife, not for you. I understand you're voting for Trump.
You're not on this list, so I'm pretty sure that means something.
Right. You don't want to push too hard because you don't want to like step on anything or make things awkward. So, but I definitely can relate to that. Like, I've seen that a lot. And, the hope is at least that comes out in the actual votes, and people can vote how they actually feel and what they actually want, and don't feel pressured by whatever kind of relationship they're in. And I think one thing that people have talked about is there's a concern that because more people are voting with mail-in ballots, it's easier for people in some ways to feel pressured because they're filling it out with their spouse, with their family members, whatever it is. And if that might reduce the kind of gender gap between married couples, maybe. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But that's just like something people have mentioned, I think, but I suspect we're going to have like a huge gender gap, and there's no way that doesn't also include a lot of husbands voting for Trump, a lot of wives voting for Harris, and maybe they never realized that happened between the two of them. It's possible the reverse, right? Some wives might think, we're all voting for Harris, and then the husbands are like secretly for Trump. Go both ways, But
yeah,
my dad and my mom they cancel each other out because one's a Republican and Democrat for years. And ever since 2016, though, since Trump entered the scene, it's like unified front, two votes for Clinton, 2 votes for Biden, 2 votes for Kamala.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I actually think we would be in way worse shape if Haley had gotten the nomination. I think she could have made the case for change in a way that neither Trump or Harris can. And I think she doesn't give off that kind of crazy vibe that Trump does.
I think that's a big thing. Yeah, big plus for her. I think in some ways I thought it would be better because we have like 2 sane candidates running who are like not like, I wouldn't be like afraid of a Nikki Haley presidency, right? Like that's like, so in that way I feel better, in that way. But you're right. Like I think it'd be a much harder push to like get the kind of turnout we need, get the kind of make the case that we are making against Trump. Because like I think that like one thing that is important to always emphasize, especially for like Republicans who are thinking about voting for Harris, is like this isn't like a lens that we're applying to like any Republican, right? We're not saying like Nikki Haley is a threat to democracy. We're not saying like Mitt Romney is a threat to democracy, right? We're saying like this is a very specific case we're making about one person who tried a coup in 2020, who like has been convicted of felonies and has more felony charges coming down the pike, and who has been found liable for sexual abuse. Like, it isn't like a case we're making against just anybody, right? Like generals and advisors of Nikki Haley have not come out and said this person is unfit for the office. They said that about Trump, right? And so I just think it's like important to like recognize like this is a very unique case we're making about Trump. And you're right, that would not be the case we'd make against Nikki Haley because it wouldn't make any sense. And I think it's important when we're talking to like Republicans to be like, part of why it's great to defeat Trump now is that you could have a Nikki Haley as your nominee in 2028. Like you would get a fresh start for the party to like move in a more sane, sensible direction where like there's more bipartisanship, which I think is good.
One thing that came up, I was interviewing my Florida brother who is a Trump supporter. And he's on these like Telegram groups, and he watches Newsmax. He listens to like Theo Vaughn. Like he's plugged into that whole kind of subculture. And I don't mean this in a negative way, like a segment of the universe that's just as valuable as anybody else, and they're all humans and great.
Right.
But the thing that he said was he felt like there was this growing frustration from young men who feel like the DEI woke stuff has marginalized them, and that they feel that Trump represents this more masculine kind of macho testosterone approach to the world, and that it's not about policy, because I could argue it, but hey, like unemployment is down. This is good for young men too, and whatever. Like he's like, no,
Right.
no, no. It's not about that. It is about a cultural anxiety around the direction of, um, where they perceive power and opportunity to be, and they feel they're being left out. And I was like, yeah, that's if that's what Trump is tapping into, that's a very powerful. It's fear, uncertainty. Like that's very powerful, and it gives like it extends an option where it's like, oh, I'm going to make you strong again and proud again, and
Mhm.
thriving and all this. Are you hearing that? I mean, obviously you're in graduate school, so
Right.
you're probably not hanging around with a lot of Theo Von people, but like what's your read on that? Because I think he's right that I'm not agreeing with the rationale, but I think there is something there.
Yeah, and I think you can like see in like polling data like how like male loneliness has gone up a lot, and that's like, and it's true also that female loneliness has also gone up. Like everyone's just feels a lot more lonely and alone like than they have in the past, and like that's gonna make people, I think, just like trying to look for some sense of community. And if like a manosphere, whatever the term is for like this kind of like feels like they're like picking themselves up and bucking people up, like that's going to be compelling. And I think one thing that I think the Democratic Party has to do a lot better at, I think just everyone has to do better at it, just kind of like trying not to make things as like zero sum kind of. And I think that what I noticed about like a lot of like the kind of the red pill kind of stuff is it made it very zero sum. It was like, men's problems is that it's all a woman's faults, right? And like that's like, in a way, it can feel nice because you're like, okay, it's not my fault at all, right? My problems are all because of like someone else, like immigrants or women or whoever it is, right? And it can be very compelling in that way. And like at the same time, I think the Democratic Party has at times not kind of acknowledged that like there are a lot of problems that men go through too, and like that's an important thing to address. And like it's sometimes there's this idea that like if we just give everyone a job and healthcare, then they'll just think exactly like us, and they'll like just be Democrats and they'll vote for Democratic policies. And like no, there's a lot that goes into how people feel comfortable voting for you and feel like you hear them and see them. And I think the Democratic Party has to get a lot better at that. That includes doing things like trying to find like trusted messengers who can go into these spaces, like go into Rogan, go into like these shows and like kind of make the case in a compelling way. It means like in advertising, trying to make it in ways that kind of can actually appeal to people. And I haven't always seen that in a lot of Democratic messaging. But then it also, I think, takes an acknowledgement, like the ecosystem, like they're living in the media ecosystem. It does create a lot of really easy algorithms that do push, I think, men very easily into these kind of right-wing algorithms, these kind of red pill spaces. Like, I think there's like, I forget which article was written about this, but basically, for men who are like interested in weightlifting, like it's just like, and we're looking for videos on weightlifting and things like that, and going to the gym, it like directed you right into like right-wing spaces and these kind of like podcasts, because they, as you said, right, like Trump has this kind of macho energy. There's kind of like, so I think one of the things that is important to recognize is like, it's so easy nowadays to just get people directed to the extremes, like just because of how our fractured media system exists and how social media companies exist to kind of get you as angry as possible, as like, they want you to like, they'll show you like left-wing content to get you riled up, and they'll show you right-wing content just like get you like as fully extreme as possible. So I think it's like acknowledging that media space is important too, and how we like think thoughtfully about how we can reach out to men in general. I think it's a tough issue. I'm not sure there's like an easy answer, but I think it's like important to acknowledge it and then try and just be intentional about our messaging and our communicating. Like there's a reason Pete Buttigieg goes on Fox News. It's not because he's like going to convince everyone on Fox News to become a Democrat. It's because it's important to hear that message at least a few times a week, right? And so
yeah,
I think we have to do better at that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping we get a win. But if not, and even if we do, whether it's 2032 or 2028, like I would not mind seeing Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, he's a really smart guy.
Yeah. Okay, do you think so? I think I had the Steve Marchand on, who was the New Hampshire campaign manager for Yang back in 2020, and he was making the argument that Trump is kind of making a bet on a non-traditional group, which is young males,
Yeah.
to turn out, who historically don't turn out as much as young females do. And even in my door knocking today, there were a lot of women who were like, "Oh, I already voted. I voted early. Like, don't worry, I got you. Like, it's on." And I don't want to use stereotypes, but I did notice that more women seem to be put together in terms of, like, had a plan to vote or already voted. Um, Young men typically don't in previous elections as much.
Yeah.
What do you think? Like, will this whole red pill UFC Hulk Hogan thing manifest in the polls?
Well, in full disclosure, I have not voted yet, but I'm voting tomorrow. So just early voting. So
There you go.
I'm continuing the trend, I
Because
guess.
you're a dude.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a huge gender gap we're seeing in a lot of the early voting states. Particularly, I think we see it in Georgia and I think Pennsylvania and Michigan too. But I think we're seeing it less in Nevada because I don't think they publicize it, so it's like modeled. But yeah, definitely a huge gender gap in that. I think that I am less kind of confident that Trump's actually going to get a lot of these new voters into the system. I think that there's definitely an effort to, as you mentioned, like UFC, Rogan, all this stuff, trying to like really make the case to like these kind of people who typically don't go into politics and don't vote and like, but I just think it's tough to get people who don't care as much about politics, don't follow it as much, and don't necessarily feel as much of an urgency about it to actually get out to vote and like take the time to actually do the steps to actually do it, right? So I remember I was watching this one podcast with David Pakman. I forget who he was with, but it was like one of these kind of young men who did like his like kind of big kind of streams to a lot of other young men, and they were talking about tariffs and about Trump, and the guy was like, I think I would vote for Trump. And David Pakman asked him like, oh, okay, so you're gonna vote for Trump? And he's like, well, actually, I guess I don't even know if I'm registered. And that was like a telling moment because we were like 2 weeks away from the elections. Like, shouldn't you know? So I do think there is like an element of like people who are very engaged in politics are going to be making sure they're registered to vote, making sure their friends vote, making sure that they are getting out to the polls early and voting. And it's a gamble. And I think probably it will end up being a bad bet to say that the people who typically don't vote and don't think usually feel invested enough to vote are going to come out for one man, Trump, who is still pretty flawed, is still like even if you do think he's like macho and manly, like whatever it is, right? That really, and you might vote for him if it's like an opinion poll on your phone. It takes some effort to go out and vote, and like you have to request a ballot, you have to fill out some forms, you have to go wait in line, whatever it is you're doing your mechanism. So I just think I don't think it'll materialize in the way that Trump's campaign is hoping for. I think you'll definitely see probably. I would expect a gender gap in election day voting, probably that like more men than women vote would probably make sense to me because you compensating for a lot more women voting early voting. So it wouldn't surprise me if more men voted than women in the election day. But I just think at the end of the day, I have a lot more confidence that we'll end up with a gender gap that is like favorable to Trump, to favorable to Kamala, both in like raw margin, but also like actual turnout too. And so I just don't think it's going to come together. I don't know if you're more pessimistic than me about that.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think the gender advantage that the Democrats have will hold up. And part of it is it's not just even with politics, even with like college applications and college readiness, like women high school or girls in high school tend to be a little bit more like organized and on their game when it comes to college preparation.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. That men, boys take a little longer to mature. The executive function takes a little bit more time. And then, they boys go through different chemical changes in their evolution. So I'm not surprised that there are a lot of, young men who will gladly debate and talk and be on Twitter, but when it actually comes to, okay, making sure you're registered, filling out this long freaking ballot with all these propositions and folding it the right way and signing it in the right place and dating it and walking over or dropping it off in the right place, it is a lot of work. And even my MAGA brother, like he sends me all this stuff. Look at this video of Kamala laughing and all this crap, like for the last 3 months, right?
Yeah.
But then I asked him, like, oh, well, so you're so fired up, like, what are you doing to volunteer for the Trump campaign? He's like, oh, I'm kind of busy. It's like, so, there is like, I think there are parts of it that he really likes, like the owning of the live type stuff, but the actual kind of grunt work of getting out there, and certainly like what you and I heard and so many others are doing, like knocking on doors, like
Tom running through a snowstorm, like, yeah.
Yeah, no, dude, he would not do that. He would be like, you're crazy. I sent him a picture to our family chat. I was like, oh, look at Nevada's beautiful because the leaves are changing and stuff, and in Reno. And he's like, what are you doing in Nevada? And I was like, dude, I'm knocking on doors. And he's just like, oh God, like he can't fathom, doing that. Well, one thing that we didn't talk about is the ground game historically has been strong in the Democratic Party because you have unions and all of these like activist organizations that kind of assemble and get out there and remind voters to vote and everything like that and persuade and turn them out. Now this year, there's Elon is doing basically like a shadow voter registration kind of incentive. Like if you sign my petition, which requires you to be registered, you will get a chance to win $1 million a day, right? One person will win $1 million.
Shoot, I already registered before that happened. Darn.
I know. We should have filled out a stupid petition. Yeah, that's a good point. That would have been hilarious. Yeah. And then we could have then redeployed the money to a Harris PAC, and that would have been a great story.
That would have been.
Oh, that would have been brilliant.
It's okay. Next 4 years, we'll try it next 2028. We'll re-register. Okay.
Yeah. So you got that, and then I think he's donated 125 million to is it the MAGA Inc. PAC? One of the PACs that's doing a lot of the canvassing, the paid canvassing. I know in Pennsylvania, though, a lot of the kind of Musk-funded canvassers are out there. I didn't see many in Nevada, or at least in Reno, where I am right now. Yeah. But what do you think? Like, do you think maybe that advantage that the Democratic Party used to have, which they said counts for like a point?
Yeah, point or two. Yeah.
Is that going to be diminished because of the billionaire kind of astroturfing?
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that is important too about like the whole super PAC discussion is because I believe it was a Supreme Court decision recently that basically allowed super PACs to more easily coordinate their ground game with the main campaign. It used to be you had them to keep them very separate and couldn't coordinate at all. But the Supreme Court said basically you can coordinate on like you knock this area, I'll knock this area, and that does make it a lot more efficient to do a super PAC kind of as your ground game campaign. And so that definitely has made Elon's campaign more effective probably than it would be like, I don't know, 4 years ago. Which is like, because the problem, of course, is like, so right? If you don't have that communication, then like, okay, I knock a door on Monday. They say, okay, I've already voted for Trump. Then you knock a door Tuesday, that same door. Say, I already voted for Trump. I told you yesterday. You're wasting a lot of resources, right? So that coordination is important. It's also important to note, right? There's also a lot of kind of free media we talk about, right? So Elon Musk just being head of Twitter, right? A lot of power to like kind of up his stuff, up things that he thinks are good. He of course tweets, I think, some kind of crazy stuff, but he tweets a lot of pro-Trump stuff that does get a lot of like views. What that means for the algorithm, like who knows? But I think anecdotally, people feel like there's more right-wing stuff in their feed than they have in the past. Who knows how much that is like him tipping an algorithm scale, how much it's just more people being on Twitter who are right-wing. But there's a certain element of like that maybe helping Trump too. I think though, at the end of the day, it probably helps Trump a little bit, but I still think his ground game is going to be a lot worse than Kamala's. And I think that's just I think Elon can only help so much. I don't think it's going to be enough. There's an article I think recently about how I think something like 25% of Elon Musk's like door knockings, like in Nevada, I think it was, or it may have been in Arizona, or maybe both states, may have been like fraudulent. So people would like take his money, like go knock 50 doors. They then go to like a restaurant like 2 miles away, drink a
Right.
beer, start like checking off. Okay, not
Oh
home,
yeah, I
home.
guess they could do that. Yeah.
And that's the problem with having a lot of paid canvassers as your like vehicle to get your message out there. Like Kamala Harris is not like, you know, paying me to go knock on doors in Philly. She's not paying you to go create turfs for her and like go to a snowstorm in Nevada, right? We're doing that because we really care about this, and that's always going to yield, I think, a lot better results because like we are not going to go to the restaurant and just check off the boxes because like we want to win and we care about this, and so that is, I think, one like critical weakness. Like I think also when DeSantis was running in the primary, he did a lot of like leaning on his super PAC. I forget what the
Yeah.
super PAC was called. It was like, I'm gonna just use this as my full like turnout operation. And it did not work out well for him because I think it's hard to get your message out with just paid canvassers. And so I think I think it probably will get him some votes, but I don't think it's being like hyped up, I think, a lot more than actually will help in the end. Because I don't think it's gonna make the huge difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like I think Bloomberg had a similar issue where he spent a lot of money on paid stuff, and it just, you know, like if people don't feel it, like it doesn't matter how many
Right.
hourly workers you kind of pay to knock on doors. Like to your point, like that many of them may not do it, or they may do it kind of half-heartedly. And
Yeah, I had a friend in college who was doing he's like signed up to be a Bloomberg canvasser, and like he did not support Bloomberg at all. But it's like, hey, you know, it's like $20 an hour, you know. It's
yeah,
like,
that's
okay,
right.
I mean, I'm gonna go to Iowa for Bernie, and I think Bernie did better than Bloomberg in a lot of states.
Oh hell yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, you can't compare.
yeah.
Wow, I mean, when you mentioned Bernie, I still wonder, you know, if he had gotten the nomination in 16, do you think I think he would have beaten Trump, right?
I think he would have won in 2016, even though
Yeah.
I guess Alan Lichtman would have disagreed, I guess, but like with his
Yeah.
13 keys. But
Yeah.
I think he would have won in 2016. I do not think he would have won in 2020. And this is like something I've kind of reflected on a lot. I kind of think it may have been the case that Biden was the only person that could actually have beaten Trump in 2020. And as someone, I knocked on doors for Bernie. I like worked really hard for Bernie in 2020 because I felt like he was the best candidate. And I think I was very surprised that it was as close as it was in 2020 when, you know, polls were off by a lot and Biden narrowly won. But that actually made me think more and more like, that was really close. I'm not sure we had a margin where we could lose like 3% of Republican voters who voted for Biden who maybe wouldn't have voted for Bernie, you know? And it's so tough in like these kind of like, because at the same time, right, Bernie did a lot better with Latino voters in the primary. And Biden, that was a weakness of his in 2020, right? So would that have been able to make it up for it? So like, we'll never know for sure. I worry that Bernie wouldn't have been able to win in 2020, though. I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in a weird way, Biden was the perfect guy for 2020.
Yeah.
He was, you know, Scranton Joe, been around for a while. He's
Steady
just,
hand, you know.
yeah, we don't want any more drama. And he was put together enough to be a great alternative. You know, he didn't have the kind of age that he does now. But I think in 2016, the people who were pissed off and feeling like they were left behind, I think Bernie spoke to them and had an answer in a way that Hillary did not.
Yeah.
I think Hillary was like, oh, you'll get more college loans. And I think a lot of people were like, well, I'm not going to college, or, you know, I'm 30 years old. Like, I'm not going to go back to college.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was I remember following that primary so closely and donating to Bernie, hoping that he would have won. But he's an impressive guy, and you know, even though at that time I felt he was a little left of me, I'm kind of center left.
Yeah.
But now, like over the years, I'm like, you know what, he might be right. Like it may be like single payer might be a better. You know, like there's a lot of things that he's been advocating that I think a lot of us are coming around on. So yeah, it's a shame that we didn't get him, but yeah, I'm glad he's still being a lead now.
Yeah, and I think I have maybe moved a little more to the center left. I think
Uh-huh.
maybe we're meeting right in the middle there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I still have like a tons of respect for him. I think he's just a very like honest, caring guy who just, and I think he brings a lot of, whether like the exact like answer is like because I agree, I like Medicare for all too. But I like, if we can get to a public option, like I kind of feel like best we
Mhm.
can do to get more healthcare to people, like I'm down with that. And I feel like
Yeah.
before, I like 20 Me was like, it's Medicare for all or bust. And I was like, I think what Bernie does really well is I think he focuses on really core issues and then puts forward like, I think, solutions that are really focused on like addressing like the gravity of the problem, right? So like Medicare for all is getting like the core of the problem and bringing it up as an important topic. And whether we end up doing Medicare for all public option, like I think it'll be partly because of Bernie pushing so hard on like the injustice of our current healthcare system. And like, so I think like he deserves a lot of credit for like pushing the party to focus on money in politics and healthcare a lot more than I think they would have without him. So I think he deserves a lot of credit.
Mayor Pete was pretty strategic in his Medicare for those who want it proposal. Because then it's like, okay, yeah, if I like my private insurance, I'm going to keep it. And if I want Medicare, even if I'm not, over, I'm only 40 years old, 40, like I can have that option to get it.
Yeah.
Actually the topic we had around the rising anxiety and anger
Mhm.
around younger male voters, I feel like that's going to be that would be a problem for Pete because he does not fulfill the UFC weightlifting kind of Hulk Hogan kind
Maybe
of.
not, but I'm not sure many Democrats do. I mean, I'm trying to think of who I would think is like the weightlifting Joe. Maybe Fetterman, but like
Fetterman, yeah, pre-stroke Fetterman.
even I think Fetterman today. I mean, he's made a lot of recovery. I think overall, I think he could still, but I don't think he would run for president. Is the thing. Like I think like you think
Right.
about like who's the most UFC. Probably it's Fetterman, and maybe I don't know if you're following the Texas Senate race with Colin Allred.
Yeah.
He's like
Yeah.
big football player. He's like
Yeah.
really smart. Like he's a civil rights lawyer. Like this was like
Yeah.
a guy who's like I
Yeah.
could like imagine like being in that, but of course he's got to win first, and that's tough in Texas. But yeah,
And what about Newsom? I mean, he's a masculine,
yeah,
handsome man, but I don't know if he fulfills the Joe Rogan type of man.
I don't know. I always feel like Newsom feels like a little too like slick. I don't know,
Yeah.
just a little too. I don't know, but I think it's tough because like I think Democratic politics and coalitions and primaries kind of reward, I think, people who are less leaning into like they're like kind of like pushing people around and like kind of taking what they want and like being like, which I think are like things that some people associate with like that like hyper like macho kind of vibes. And I think they generally reward people who are like more like caring, compassionate, like joyful, like Tim Walz, for example, right? It's like, I don't think he's like comes across like a UFC kind of like Rogan guy, but I think he comes off as like a very caring and compassionate, guy that I really like. But like, so I guess I'm not sure there are as many like kind of like
What do you
fire
think about
breathing men.
Shapiro? Do you think
Yeah.
Shapiro has enough testosterone for some young male voters?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think Shapiro seems like a compelling, like, I think he could maybe do it. Yeah. But I think like at the end of the day, we got to try and just find the candidate who we feel like can speak pretty well, can like is smart, has good policies, and then like is kind of brave enough and focused enough to like be able to get the right message to those people. And I think it's kind of tough to know ahead of time who exactly appeals to who, because I think like it can be sometimes like a jump ball. Like I don't think people would have expected necessarily like Kamala Harris to like rise in her favorability the way she has like so much. And so sometimes it's like just like the people you expect to appeal to certain groups don't. And so but I would think that Shapiro would be like probably a good pick to like try and be like someone who could like be masculine, but also like not be a jerk masculine, be like, yeah, I think that's important.
I could see Shapiro holding up for a 3-hour Rogan interview and convincing some people like, oh, maybe Democrats are not all these pushover,
and I think
whatever
Pete
they
too,
call.
honestly. I mean, I think Pete could too. I mean, I think
Yeah, true.
I think, like, I mean, in the day, he served in the military. Like,
Yeah.
I think he's a brilliant talker. I think he knows how to like communicate to different audiences. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sleeping on Pete being able to get back some young men too.
I mean, I think in terms of like raw intellectual horsepower, which I greatly value, like
Yeah.
I think Pete's in a different league than a lot of politicians out there today.
Yeah.
And so like I'm all for that. Yeah. So well, you know, we gotta win on Tuesday, and then we'll worry about the bench later.
I will say real quick, I think we need to invest in more bald candidates because I feel like they've had a really good track record. We have Fetterman, we have Mark Kelly in Arizona. I mean, I don't know what it is, but maybe we've been thinking about it wrong, that like too much hair is really the problem on
That's
our head.
the Newsom problem. He needs to go bald.
His hair is like so sculpted and perfect.
His hair's perfect. Yeah.
I know
It's
he's
like
gonna do it. Yeah.
yeah, Newsom does have this vibe like you're gonna like he's a ultra luxury realtor that's gonna sell you like this
Yeah.
beautiful Malibu mansion.
I'm telling you,
Yeah.
every Democrat bald by 2028 landslide. It's over. You know, no chance.
Okay, let's wrap with this, and then if people have any questions in the comments, I see Jeremy, you had a question, so I'm gonna highlight that in a second. But so anybody watching live, a couple things. One, thank you for joining us live. We've got 59 people with us right now, and there'll be more on replay. Definitely give us a like, and if you have any questions or topics you want us to hit, put them in the chat. Okay, let's do this, Phil.
Okay.
It's Tuesday. It's Wednesday morning. Trump won.
Oof.
What would be your 3-sentence kind of like 3 bullet point executive summary on why he won?
Okay. Probably 1, Biden is not popular, and people did not feel like Kamala represented enough of a break from that and held her somewhat responsible for the administration. 2, I think people would just feel at their core that whether it's not actually correct, I think, but they feel like things were better 4 years ago under COVID, under Trump, than they were now, and they don't really care about what the policies they either do. It's just at its core, they feel like it was better under Trump than it was now, and so we want to go back to that. And so that would be a really motivating force. And third, I think immigration would kind of outstrip issues like abortion or democracy when people were going to the polls, and people would just feel like that's an issue that Trump does have an advantage on. Like, I don't think he deserves it after he killed the border bill, but he has an advantage on that. And I think that at the end of the day, if people go to the polls thinking they don't like Biden and they feel like Kamala is too close to that, they think inflation is all their fault, and they think that Trump could, whether things are better under Trump, and immigration is something they think is really deciding their vote more than abortion and democracy. Like, I think that's how Trump wins.
Yeah. I think those are 3 really great points, and I probably would have said similar ones. So maybe I'll add point 4 and 5, although I think your 3, like, hey, this was a judgment on the Biden administration. Second, you know, the economy, and third, the border. Like, yeah, I think that we'll see those in the exit polls, regardless of whether Trump wins or not. That'll be clearly drivers for his support. I think number 4 for me would be maybe a little bit of a backlash against the DEI woke stuff that was so prevalent in like the whole defund the police thing. Like, that was just such nonsense. I mean, I remember when it came out, I was like, guys, this is not gonna. Number one, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Like, if anything, you should pay them more to raise the standards.
Right. And to get better training, all this stuff, you need more funding a lot of the time. Yeah.
And there was a time where there was at least at one point, a Twitter hashtag to defund ICE. Like, so that was also not like, and I know a lot of centrist Democrats were not in favor of that, but I don't think we also said no. We just kind of remained silent. And then it became like the Democratic brand, even though it was probably a small portion of the party. So I think the kind of pushback, I think, and you see a lot of, I think, from the young men, that pushback. So that would be my point 4 would be pushback against the 2019 kind of pendulum swing in the Democratic Party to the left. And then point 5 would be, I think, maybe similar to your first point about Biden. I just think had Biden not run for re-election, we had a open primary, where we had a full year to see all our options. And also, even if Harris had gotten the nomination, she would have had more time to put together the organization.
Yeah.
Before this call, you and I were discussing, I ran out of turfs to knock today. And that's just for everybody who's listening, like when you're knocking on doors and volunteering, you get these lists. There's an app, and you knock on them, and then when you go through your list, many people are like, okay, they're good, they're going to go for lunch, and that was their day. But I was like, hey, I'm here to work, so give me more lists. And then by the third list, they said, there's no more for you. Like we don't have any more prepared. And I think that is an example of where you wonder, well, like if you were at a company and there's a new CEO, like it takes time for them to rebuild the whole team and all the process and everything like that. So for me, point 5 would have been, we didn't give Harris time to build a full, playoff ready team.
Yeah.
And we just were like, oh yeah, go in the fourth quarter and win the Super Bowl for us.
Yeah. No, I do wonder sometimes how many people will go to the polls on Tuesday and be like, wait, Joe Biden isn't running? Hopefully not that many people, but I have to, some people just really don't pay attention to this stuff. So I think there'll probably be some people, but.
Oh God. Yeah. Okay. Let's do the same exercise for Harris wins. Yeah. What are the 3 bullets? Yeah. We'll end with that one.
Okay. Yeah. So first, she did a really good job of getting women out to vote. They came out in particularly for abortion rights, but just generally like detesting Donald Trump with his history of sexual abuse, and just saying we want to stand against this. And I think you'll see I suspect that's what we'll see is very large turnout among women. That's what drove the Seltzer poll that came out today. It's huge movement for Harris among women, independent women. And so I think we'll see that. That's one thing. I think 2 is that I think there will be a huge element of just exhaustion with Trump. Just people feeling like it's been going on for 9 years. He's been running again and again and again. Even when he won, he was like back on the campaign trail like 2 days later doing rallies. Like
he loves it.
Yeah, he loves it. And I mean, the American people like new stuff, and they like to feel like they're moving forward. And I think there'll be a feeling of like, do we really want 4 more years of this guy just constantly on our screen, like every day with some new insane thing? And I think some people will just be like, let's just move on, And I think that's why like Harris is like new way forward. We're not going back. Is like, I think that's a compelling message. And then the third thing I think will be important is, I think the focus of the campaigns in the last few weeks of the election have been very different, and I think will have a big impact. And that is that Harris's ads, if you watch them, they're very focused on abortion, Trump being unhinged, the economy, like lowering prices, and that's really core to her message. In these last, you see the ads, that's what it's all about. Trump's is a little less focused, right? It's kind of anti-trans stuff that doesn't really affect anyone in the state. He's trying to hit her on some other things too, like here and there on the economy and the border, but it's not as focused. You see the Madison Square Garden stuff. What the heck was that message about? You see him talking about Liz Cheney and how he wants to fight her, and the comments about her it feels very unfocused. And I think we'll see in the last few weeks, Harris had a focused message to try and make the case on a lot of core issues that matter to people. And Trump was kind of just saying a lot of nonsense and stuff that didn't really resonate with people. And when people were deciding in the last few weeks who we're going to vote for, they went with a person giving them a compelling message instead of just kind of a lot of nonsense. And I think that's another thing that will matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with those points. I think maybe a sub point to your people are tired of the drama. I think one of the talking points will be, wow, in the exit polls, independent and moderate Republican women broke for Harris.
Yeah.
And there were more of those than the Theo Von kind of audience, and at least that showed up at the polls that voted.
Yeah.
So that would be a great story. Yeah, I think Harris' victory is more of a vote against Trump, which is kind of what Biden's win was, and I'm fine with that. I mean, it's certainly motivating for me.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is like I'm actually quite happy with her policies, like strengthening the ACA, roll back tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires,
build more housing,
support the defense of Ukraine. Like these are all I'm good with this.
Support the ceasefire and hostage release. Like that's it's like,
so when people are like, we don't know what her policies is, like, her whole website has a whole thing of policy. What she is not great about is communicating them. I will say that.
I think she sometimes does the anecdote first and the policy second. I think the order switched, but
So, but yeah, I think I could totally see that being the Wednesday story as well. That she won because of women, a lot of independent, moderate Republican women. People were tired of him, and that's it. And the people who we needed to turn out, they turned out, and the people that he needed to turn out did not turn out.
Yeah. And hey, the ground game too. That's why you're working at it, right?
Let's hope so.
A little bit of credit.
Yeah. There's a few doors that we could take credit for. You mentioned the ads. Let's take a look at well, in fairness, we'll look at the Harris closing ad and the Trump closing ad.
Yeah.
Then we'll take a couple questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Does that sound good to you?
Sounds perfect.
All right, let's go here to the Harris one. Let's see.
Come here, Hannah. Shake my hand. How you doing?
Good.
And bring everybody back together.
And that's exactly how I feel.
That's what I'm doing, man.
Okay, you have to stay in touch with me, okay? I'm very serious about that. Okay. Throughout this campaign, I've seen the best of America, and I've seen what is holding you back and weighing you down. High costs, fundamental rights taken away, and politics that have driven fear and division. You deserve better. As president, I'll bring a new generation of leadership. I'll take on price gouging and bring down the cost of groceries and housing and prescriptions. I'll fight for your freedom to make your own choices, and I will protect your health care and your benefits, not take them away. The vast majority of people in our country have so much more in common than what separates them. Good people, hardworking people. We see in our fellow Americans neighbors, not enemies. We believe in each other. We believe in our country. We're not falling for these folks who are trying to divide us. Together, we'll build a brighter future for our nation, where we stand for freedom, we stand for justice, we stand for the dignity of work. We haven't yet quite reached all of those ideals, but we will die trying because we love our country. Now, the baton is in our hands. I pledge to seek common sense solutions to make your life better. And I pledge to be a president for all Americans. Now I'm asking for your vote, because as president, I will get up every day and fight for the American people. I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Wow.
That was pretty good.
Knock on 3 lists tomorrow.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, what I love is it evokes this vibe of like, we're going to have a grown up in the room. We're not going to call the other side like, oh, you're never going to have a country again.
Right.
And, who isn't for equal rights and better healthcare and these things. So, yeah, I thought it was a very well done ad. And it also was quite, I also like how the Democratic Party has reacquired patriotism as a core value. Like, I think we were kind of hesitant about it before because we didn't want it to come across as like being divisive or anything, but I think it's like, no, this is good. Like, we love this country. This is a great country. Like, let's just say it, because the other side was making it sound like we all hated America, which was crazy. So yeah, I thought it was good. What did you think?
Yeah, and I think one thing that was like, I think it's great. I think one thing that was super interesting is in the entire ad, I don't think she mentions Trump once.
Oh yeah,
wild to think about, because we talk about like, isn't it vote for Kamala or vote anti-Trump, right?
Yeah,
and I actually I like that. I think she's done a lot of advertising throughout that's made the case. She had the debate. She did a lot of stuff that's like really driving home Trump's unhinged. He's unstable. Don't vote for him, right? But this is a very positive message of like, we're moving forward, and we're moving forward together. And I do think this is not like an ad to like run down every single policy position you want. This is an ad about like getting at the core of like who I am. I'm going to fight for you, and we're going to do it together. Like, I think that's a really beautiful idea. So I think she does a good job in this ad. I like it a lot. Yeah. And so go ahead.
Yeah, your point about not mentioning Trump in a way was sort of the subtext of like, imagine a world where we don't talk about this guy anymore.
Yeah.
Like, how does that feel? That feels freaking amazing.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So okay, let me see if I can pick up Trump's closing.
Okay. I'm gonna brace myself for this. Don't know what this is, so it's flying blind.
I don't often watch his ads. Hold on, let me see. So okay, must be this one. Yes. Oh yeah, I can tell. Wait till you see the thumbnail. I mean, it just evokes the it's
I had such nice positive feelings just now.
Like we fight. I feel like there's gonna be some testosterone in this one, but let's see.
Just a little. We'll see.
4 years ago, we took a wrong turn and lost our purpose. Lost the strength that makes Americans who we are. If we dared to speak the truth, it was called hate speech, and our values were labeled shameful. That's when everything we care about fell apart. We surrendered our borders, our paychecks, and our courage. Our patriotism was called toxic. Men could beat up women and win medals, but there was no prize for the guy who got up every day to do his job. Now we're being asked to settle for the way things are. And we're wondering if America can make a comeback. We can, because we've done it before. When we get knocked down, we don't stay down, we get up again. We fight, we fight, we fight.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Interesting.
What do you think?
It wasn't as aggressive as I thought it would be. And similarly, I don't think they mentioned Kamala Harris once in there also, which is also, I think, but I don't think this ad is as effective as Kamala's. I think partly because I think Kamala's message is more about us all coming together to fight for something a common good, right? I feel like Trump's infused a lot of victimization into it, with the whole start of it, they called us hate speech.
There was some grievance in that.
It felt a lot of grievance to it, which I think maybe that works for some people, but I do think it's not as unifying as hey, let's go together, come to solutions, build a path forward, new generation leadership. It feels like there are more unifying themes in Harris's. I think it is probably smart for Trump to, bring up the idea of a comeback, invokes the idea of we're going back to what we had before, this what we talked about, right? Trying to make the case that I can give you what happened before COVID, and I'm the only one who can. I mean, I still was there's anti-trans sports stuff in there, which I think I don't know how that moves people. It's maybe just a signal, I guess, to the base. But I mean, I think if I was Trump in that situation, I think I would have hit more on inflation and the border and that. I think he could have had more of that video be about that. And I think had more of himself in it too, of because there was a few clips of Trump in there, but not much. And Trump, I don't think even spoke in that, right? I think
the narrator.
I think there's some studies about how the most effective kind of ads are either contrast ads that have someone the candidate themselves speaking, or a voter themselves speaking. Those the three big ones. And this had nothing of that. And I think Kamala's ad had her speaking directly to you. So you had the sense of like, okay, she's talking to me as a voter. She's listening to me. So I think that could have been something that could have been better in the ad as well. I don't think it's like a bad ad. I just think it's not as effective as it could be, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
I think it was an extremely effective ad for his base.
Yes.
You know, like that ad is not trying to get Romney, McCain, Haley Republicans. That ad is to get his base, including his, super base, which is young males, to really get pissed off and say, yeah, screw all the stuff about I think the imagery was the boxing controversy and then the shoplifting stuff. I mean, they're running against the 2019 kind of Democratic Party.
Yeah, but
which is smart because I think it was not a popular look. So I think this was a turnout thing, whereas I think Harris's I think she was going for the undecideds there. I think she was going for
those Haley voters.
Yeah. So we'll see. Like, will the Trump trains kind of overwhelm these kind of double hater centrists?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think they will. But who knows, man?
I think people want to like be somewhat unified, have some kind of common goal while working towards. I think that's a better message, just like at the end of the day. I think Trump could have made a message about that, at least be a little more compelling, a little more geared towards like undecided voters. But I think you're right. He didn't make that choice.
All right. We have a few quick comments and then we'll wrap.
Yeah, sounds good.
Jeremy basically has all the great questions.
But
others who are live, you can ask now or forever hold your peace. I saw the Fetterman interview. Number one, I've never found Fetterman to be the most articulate person even before the stroke. But I think after, like, his listening comprehension is not dialed in. And I didn't think it was a great.
I didn't know about that. That's interesting. Yeah, no, I think it's definitely. I don't think he was ever going to really run for president, but I think that's a fair point that like it does have some troubles with your auditory processing, and so it does make it tough to do some of the interviews. And I didn't see that interview, but take your word for it. That sounds like it would be a
and Rogan was to his credit, he wasn't like trying to trap Fetterman or anything. If anything, he was being really gracious. But yeah, I'd rather listen to a 3-hour Buttigieg interview on Rogan. That would be amazing. In fact, freaking Pete should totally do that.
Yeah, he's so good. So like, there's no one you'd rather listen to.
Okay, Jerry wants to know: do you think any swing states are up for grabs?
I mean, I would love to believe that Iowa is actually in play. That poll was very good for us, but it also, the important thing to remember is like, when polls are under 50%, you have to always keep in mind it can break at the last second in ways, and especially if you have a state has an ancestral identity towards a certain way, like Iowa, Republican, that's kind of in its DNA at this point. So probably a lot of the undecided voters in Iowa in particular, because it's not a swing state, it's mostly Republicans who are still undecided. Maybe they're probably going to break more to Trump. So I would be skeptical that Iowa's going to flip. I think Nebraska's 2nd district, I think, is going to go for Harris. I do think that it's like an outside chance that the Senate race with Osborne could possibly happen. Like I don't think he's the favorite at all, but there's like an outside 25% chance that like we could get that Senate seat. I know Trump's and Vance are campaigning in New Mexico and New Hampshire and even Virginia, I think too. I just don't believe those are really in play. I mean, I'm not sure if they think they're in play or if it's kind of like an effort to like project confidence. That's something that I think a lot of Democrats, I feel like we're always nervous and like we're always anxious about this stuff, and like that kind of in some ways drives us to do more. But I think that it can be a little bit of the opposite, where like I think Trump, especially because he will probably want to try and contest the election results and make the case this was fraudulent or whatever, it's important for him to create the image of this election is going to be a landslide, and if it's not, it's because they stole it from us, right? And so I wonder if part of the play for New Hampshire and New Mexico is to try and like build some of the groundwork to be able to be like, Like we were everywhere. We had these huge crowds in all these states. We had huge crowds in California, in New York, in New Mexico. Like I don't know if it's about that or if just them simply being supremely confident in themselves. Because the one thing Trump did in 2016 was he flipped states no one thought that he could. And I think when you do that, there's a sense of like, okay, the people who are telling me I can't win this state are wrong, right? I don't think they're actually in play. I think we're going to win New Mexico and win New Hampshire. We're going to win Virginia. Trump's going to win Iowa probably. But I mean, I think it's a play to build confidence, which is like what Trump loves, confidence.
Yeah, I also think that his national campaigning, I do think he's trying to see if he can get a popular vote, maybe even victory. I mean, there's a scenario where Florida's a lot of people there, and I live in California, and a lot of Californians are not voting because they're like, well, why should we vote? Our vote doesn't count. And it's like, well, that's a lot of popular votes that we're going to lose if Californians are just going to kind of, turn on CNN and watch the results kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, if he wins the popular but loses the electoral,
oh my God,
I could see his supporters not reconciling those two things and saying, oh, there's more evidence that it's stolen. Now, I would argue, hey, you guys reminded everybody that candidates don't campaign in populist states that aren't up for grabs.
Yeah.
That's why Trump said he didn't win last time.
Right.
So, but that, like they say, like if you're explaining, you're losing. So
I think you're right. That's one of my biggest reasons why I think it's important, even for people in deep blue, deep red states, to still vote for Kamala, is I think it does matter how much we win by. And I think that if Trump does win the popular vote, he's the first Republican since like 2004 to do that. I think it is harder for the Republican Party to move on from Trump because I think he can make the case, listen, my brand of politics won us the popular vote at least. That's more than Mitt Romney or McCain could do, right? And I think it also will make it, as you mentioned, right, easier for him to make the argument like, I actually won this thing. Like, when has a Republican won the popular vote and ever lost the Electoral College? Never happened. It must mean there's fraud, right? And obviously that's not true, but like, I do think that is a case of like, if you're going to vote, even a blue state, red state, and you're just not feeling like 100% enthusiastic, your vote still matters. It'll still be important and you should still vote.
Yeah, 100%. Like winning the popular vote does bring more to a mandate if Harris wins. And then if Trump wins and he loses a popular vote, I think it will take away one talking point that he would use to justify, extreme policies.
Yeah. And just because the mandate that Harris would get would not be like a mandate for this policy, this policy. I think it would be a mandate of we want and love our democracy, want someone to stand up for that, and we want people to like work in like common sense way. I think that would be the mandate. I think would be a really positive mandate for the country.
Yeah. If anything, I think if Harris wins, I hope, I expect her to win the popular vote. I think the biggest value of that is reducing the risk of more violence from the Trump supporters. Yeah. Because if he wins a popular vote, but not the Electoral College, I don't know what'll happen on Jan 6.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is scary that we have to like think about that as like an option. Like, I don't recall these kind of conversations happening in 2012. Like, I don't think anyone was worried about Mitt Romney or Obama, having their supporters attack anyone. Like, I think the important thing to stress though is like, Trump does not have the same tools he had in 2020. He's not the president of the United States. He doesn't control the National Guard. He doesn't have his vice president in charge of certification. Like, we have someone in power right now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who have a history of certifying results that disagree with them, even when they don't win, a history of standing up to political violence, no matter who it comes from. And I think that is a safer place to be than we were in 2020. And I think that is one of the reasons I'm going to keep that anti-political violence coalition in power with my vote. And so I am not as worried as I think if Trump loses as maybe you are, but I think it's still a fair concern that like there's a lot of stuff that can happen that's really bad if people are really upset and feel like they've been cheated out of their election, for sure.
I have another reason for us to work extra hard this next few days. There's a when we're talking about Jan 6 and stuff. There's a scenario where Trump wins, and then let's say some other some other Republican gets the nomination, because obviously Trump wouldn't. You would hope he would not try and run again. Like, I don't think he's
God willing, right? Yeah.
Constitution is pretty clear on that. Although he did answer a question last week when they said, "Oh, will you run again?" And he said, "If I win, I will choose not to run again." And I was just like, "You're not choosing. That's it. You win. That's it. But anyway, so he wins. Vance is VP, and then the 2028 election is highly contested, and Vance rejects the results.
Yeah. I mean, this is, I think, the biggest like democracy danger, like the election of Trump, that I think winning, I think people don't talk about as much. I've seen like Ben Shapiro and people like that be like, the quickest way to ensure there's no anti-democratic like effort by Trump is just to elect him, because then he won't be able to run for a third term. And I think the biggest danger, if Trump won, the way I could imagine a really electoral, like kind of constitutional crisis that he kind of instigates for an election is 2028 comes around. Trump knows that if JD Vance wins the presidency in 2028, he'll get a pardon, and he'll want one because there's still a classified documents case that is kind of scary. There's still the January 6th case, and like Trump can pause those investigations, but he can't just like end them forever. And I think JD Vance will quite explicitly pardon Trump if he wins. And Trump will be very invested in the result of this election in 2028. And so let's say JD Vance is running against Josh Shapiro, right? And we get a squeaker of an election, right? One state maybe comes down to. And now it's up to JD Vance to certify the result that he lost, and Trump to then get his DHS, his DOJ, to come out and say this was a fair election. I'm worried he would not do that. And I think the situation that I worry most about is a situation in 2028 where JD Vance is willing to not certify the results, and Trump has gotten DHS secretaries, DOJ secretaries to come out and say there was widespread fraud, right? Rudy Giuliani is the AG, and he says there's widespread fraud. Steve Bannon is DHS secretary, says widespread fraud. And then if you're a person in Congress or just a normal person in this country, right? I don't know what you're supposed to think, how you're supposed to process who actually won, because you have the president, the federal government, all the agencies that are supposed to monitor this stuff saying one thing, and hopefully state officials who are saying another, but we don't know if some of those officials will be Stop the Steal, MAGA, Secretary of State. So there's no guarantee about that. And that's when I think you get into a situation where who knows if democracy prevails in that situation, because Trump will really want a pardon, and he'll feel like if he doesn't get his replacement he wants as in that spot, he won't get a pardon and he might go to jail. So I think that's how I envision Trump kind of ending our democracy in a sense, not to mention all the other stuff that we.
And the quid pro quo with Vance will be, Trump will say, look, you take care of me, make all this stuff go away, and basically I will get all my people to power you as the successor.
Right.
And if I'm Vance, I'm like, well, I'm going to basically get handed this unshakable base of 43% of the country.
Yeah.
And I'll get the blessing of the Godfather, Right.
I mean, JD Vance called him Hitler, and now he's his vice president. I think there's not a lot JD Vance isn't willing to do to move forward,
That's the thing. Like, we all know how chaotic and crazy Trump is, but it's the 2028 scenario that we just talked about, which is terrifying. Then you have Alito being backfilled with some 35-year-old or 40-year-old hardcore MAGA Republican.
Yeah.
Maybe Sotomayor having a health issue. She's 70. And she could get backfilled by a Republican. And then you have Clarence Thomas getting his junior replacement.
Right.
I mean, then the whole freaking Supreme Court will be like for another generation.
Yeah, I mean, you could have 6 justices of the Supreme Court be appointed by Trump. And
that's not
you think they would be at a check on Trump's worst impulses. I am skeptical, because we already saw with the criminal immunity case how much they're willing to check him. Like, to be fair, they rejected a lot of his 2020 election fraud claims, and that was good that they did that. but add 3 more justices on the court for Trump. You get a court that is less and less able to check his worst impulses.
Not to mention, they'll just move the country, like things that we took for granted. I mean, I feel like we took a woman's right to choose how to manage their own pregnancy. Like we took that for granted.
Definitely.
I kind of take, gay rights for granted now. I'm like, well, that's already settled law. But who knows with the hardcore right-wing Supreme Court?
Right. And that's why one reason voting for Kamala is you're not just voting for Kamala, you're voting for someone in power who, if there's a vacancy that comes up, people retire, she'll put people who will protect a woman's right to choose and also protect gay rights and hopefully also get rid of more money in politics. I think those are good things that
campaign finance reform. Yeah, there's okay. So one last thing I wanted to do is this is kind of sad, but it'll be a motivator for us.
Okay. Oof. I don't know what this is.
These are the latest New York Times polling kind of summary.
Just out today?
Yeah, this is up to the minute.
Whoa, okay.
So you've got Trump squeaking ahead in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Decent, 2 points. I mean, this is all within the statistical kind of margin of error.
Mm-hmm.
Harris, I mean, less than 1 in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Wisconsin, less than 1. Nevada, Trump up.
Wow.
So we have to freaking turn out, man.
That wiped the smile off my face pretty quick. Yeah, I mean, listen, that's not great.
We have to get our people to turn out.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like everyone watching can help make a difference for sure. Yeah, everyone has some friends, some family in some swing state. You can text, just make sure, hey, you voting on Tuesday. You count your vote for Kamala, and go to Kamala Harris' website. There's lots of volunteer opportunities. You can text bank, you can phone bank, you can knock on doors like me and Tom. There's a lot of ways to make a difference, and I think it would be sad if Trump won by a narrow margin, and you're on Wednesday night and you're thinking, man, I wish I could have done something, and I'd done something to make that less possible.
Totally agree. It is not too late. You just go to KamalaHarris.com and then you click on the there's a volunteer. Let's see here. KamalaHarris.com. Just show people. Then you click on this volunteer thing here. Then you put in your location. And then it'll tell you exactly what's available for the dates that you want to help out and what are the high priority things, and then you get going, man.
Yeah, I mean, I went to Philadelphia because of this website. I found a bus that was taking people from New York to Philadelphia to knock doors, and it was super easy. And so anyone can do it. Yeah,
Phil, good luck out there. Thanks for all of your volunteering these last few weeks. Clearly, we need all the help we can get in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, for sure.
And we'll definitely have to well, you know what, I was thinking of doing a post-election show panel with you, Steve Marchand. There's some previous guests who've come on for one-on-ones that I think will be fun to have as a group.
That sounds fun.
So I'll contact you about that shortly.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed, and we'll see how it all goes on Tuesday. But awesome for what you're doing too. Every single bit counts because it's going to be super. It may well be very close, and
Yeah. Well, when we win, we will have a small part that we played, and if for some crazy reason we don't, then I think I'll know. I don't know how much more I could have done.
Right. No regrets. We did our duty for democracy at the end of the day. And
absolutely,
that's what counts.
Well, thank you for your service, Phil. Take care, buddy.
Take care, buddy.
Bye. All right. Steve says you got. Well, I have a financial wager with Peter, although I think he's on the better side of it right now. I gave him pretty good odds that we were going to win Pennsylvania. So we'll see. But yeah, having him on would be fun. Oh my God, having Peter on the post-election panel would be really interesting. because you have people like Peter and Phil and Marchand. Maybe we could see if we could get Yang to drop in for a little cameo. Yeah, so I'm working on that. Let me give you some closing thoughts. But before I do that, I want to thank our channel members. So let's pull them up because they're the ones that keep this show going, man. It's been now, I think, 5 years that I've been doing these streams. Crazy. Part of the reason I keep doing it isn't because it's the biggest channel on YouTube. It's one of the smallest, but we have some amazing people who kind of support the operating costs, and they basically are saying, hey, we want you to keep making this content. So thank you to the channel members. And let's get a little going away music as well. Hold on. Where's my going away music? There it is. Okay. Our biggest supporter is Soldier One. He is a member of the Nerds for Humanity cabinet. We have Kristen Slevin, Bike, and CBC. In the city council, we have Gene, David, DK, Jekalego, Mr. History, Mona, Vaughn, Yang, Dean, Galessa, Jay Perrin, Dana, Jason, Daniel, Jeremy, Mickey, Jackson, and Unkiyu. And then we have our registered nerds. It's only $1.99 a month. And I'm going to scroll. Thank you to all of you. I think Yoda was thinking of upgrading. So that'll be great to have her maybe in the city council. Moving up from registered nerd. Okay, some takeaways. Number one is I think we kind of have to prepare ourselves for the potential for Trump winning. The numbers are pretty good for him. And I think Phil summed it up well. If Trump wins, I think we will say, wow, if this was a condemnation of the Biden administration, performance on inflation, the border, and probably a little bit of a pushback against some of the woke stuff. So let's mentally prepare ourselves like that is a possibility. The one thing you can do is, number one, make sure you vote, even if you're in a blue state. Number two, if you have friends that live in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, please reach out to them and make sure that they vote for Harris. Like they have to. I basically think we need to have way better turnout to win this thing. Like we cannot win just on who, in the broad mainstream is favoring one candidate over the other. This is going to come down to who's going to be able to get their people to turn out. The other takeaway is that if Trump wins, I think I will redirect my energy to state activism. I'll be probably doing a lot more work with the California Ranked Choice Voting Initiative because I'm just going to feel like, well, DC is a freaking mess. We got to just let Trump run his course and hope we still have a country by the time he moves back to Florida. But let's hope that we don't have to talk about Trump again, and we'll have kind of a regular, normal administration led by a young president, a young woman president who supports strengthening healthcare, the Affordable Care Act, helping Medicare kind of reduce drug prices, supporting the defense of Ukraine, supporting a ceasefire in Israel, between Israel and Gaza, rolling back the tax cuts for billionaires and millionaires, so that working class folks have a shot and have more opportunity and more equity. Raising the minimum wage. I mean, there's so many, and having a Supreme Court that's not totally like going to strip away people's rights. These are all good things if you get Harris. So please do your best. And if you have already voted, or first of all, amazing. Second of all, you can volunteer. It is not too late to volunteer tomorrow and Monday. And you don't have to drive to Nevada or fly to Pennsylvania or get on a bus to Georgia. If you can, that's amazing. But you can do phone banking, text banking. You can help with ballot curing. So on the day of the election, there's going to be people for whom we can't count their ballot because they didn't sign it or date it in the right place, and we're going to have to call them and get them to cure their own ballot and show up. And so there's going to be a lot of that activity as well. So there's a lot of volunteer opportunities. Let's leave it all on the field. Let's get a win for America, for democracy, for rational thinking. And let's just put this whole Trump, half of the country wants to destroy America. You're never going to have a country back. They're all communists. Like, that talk is so poisonous and toxic. It has made it impossible for us to solve problems. So hopefully you agree. And thanks again. If you can't become a member of this channel, the next best thing you can do is like and share so that more people can discover the stream. I see there's 87 people on the live stream now. So hopefully there'll be more next time. Bye, nerds.